Our guest today is Robert Sutton, professor of management science and engineering at Stanford University. Robert co-founded Stanford's renowned D School, and he's a recognized expert in leadership, innovation, and workplace dynamics. He's also a New York Times best-selling author. His books include The No Asshole Rule, Building a Civilized Workplace and Surviving One That Isn't, and Good Boss, Bad Boss, How to Be the Best and Survive the Worst. His upcoming book, The Friction Project, co-authored with Huggy Rao, is set to be published in early 2024. And I'm delighted to have Bob here to talk about his new book. I'm very excited about this book. I read your previous book, The No Asshole Rule, and I also read Good Boss, Bad Boss, and I have my to-do list, my action items.
Thank you.
Not to be an asshole and to try to be a good boss, right?
It's not. What's easier to write about than to actually do it? So well, I appreciate it.
I even have I have a Post-it on my computer screen that says "Don't talk first," which is something I also got from one of your books. Just shut up and let the meeting happen for a while. But I wanted to start. We're going to get into what is the definition of friction, but I wanted to start with a story. So I've been at the Graduate School of Business now for 6 years, and I don't know why, but every 5 years the school has to be reaccredited. And so some committee of people from other business schools come here and say, You guys are doing okay. Well, I got an email from somebody in the front office, the dean's office, that said, we need you to contribute to our accreditation memo, and here's the topics we need you to cover. And it was a big list of topics, right? And so I was like, oh, my God, this is really important. It's my chance to talk about what Seed does at the business school. So I assigned it to, I was bad. I immediately assigned 4 people to work on this, and we created this amazing memo with graphs and charts and annexes. I think the whole thing was 12 pages long. The final memo that went to the accreditation team, there was one sentence from my 12-page, 1-month stupid project. And I was just and so when I was reading your book, I was like, God, that is friction. So what is friction in the workplace?
Well, to me, friction is simply putting obstacles in front of people that slow them down, that make their jobs hard to do, more difficult, and maybe a little bit more frustrating like yours. And just as an important footnote, that's an example of bad friction. The reason that Huggy Rao and I got into the Friction Project was because of bad friction in organizations. But sometimes friction's good, and I'm sure that we'll talk about that.
Definitely.
But that's a classic story. And I would add as kind of like a little footnote there, that is what happens when people who are in positions of power are unwittingly unaware of their cone of friction. And I suspect nobody intended you to spend a month working on that. You just misunderstood it.
I'm sure I misunderstood it. I probably should have done some inquiry. And also, what is this cone that you're describing? I think it's the number of peasants at the bottom of the village that get punished by the prince's policies is uncountable.
I also love that example because since you're like in the change business. I just write about it. You do change, and people who are in the change business and leaders often, and I'm sure you've heard many executives talk about resistance to change, and there is probably the most prestigious organizational theorist who's ever been at Stanford is the late James March. He was remarkable. And he used to talk about this thing that I would call executive magnification. He used a different term, that while there's all this stuff on resistance to change, when people are in power, sometimes what happens is people beneath them, to please them or when they don't understand an assignment, they take it further than was ever intended. And it's actually a really great thing that leaders need to do, is they need to be aware of the power and influence they have, and to say things to you like, well, no more than a few sentences will do, right?
Put boundaries.
So to me, that's a perfect example, and I've been victim of that many times, and I've done it to other people as well. So that's actually a beautiful example of unintended consequences.
Yeah. I had another phrase we used to use. So I used to work for Oxfam, is a global nonprofit.
Famous.
And the president was a brilliant guy, president of Oxfam America.
Yeah.
And he would shoot out these missives saying, I think this article is so interesting. What could this mean for our strategy, right? And you know, that would just start, like, the butter churners would start churning,
sure.
right? They're like, oh my gosh. And finally, you know, we had a COO who finally sat him down and said, you know, Ray, every time you do that, you launch 1,000 ships, right? Everyone girds for battle and off they go to see what this article means for strategy, right? So I think that's another example. It's we'll get into the typologies of friction, and the oblivious leader is sort of typology number one. So you have an example of good workplace friction, or where sometimes you need friction. And that gets to the tagline of your book, which is how smart leaders make the right things easier and the wrong things harder. And the example you gave is Google Glass.
Right.
Sergey Brin was so excited to push to market. It was a half-assed product. It bombed. God knows what it cost. But there were people on the team, presumably, who thought that was a bad idea.
Oh, yeah. And as I understand, I've talked to eventually people on the team, and people on the team told him it was too early, and he said no. And my co-conspirator Huggy Rao and I also use that as an example, and I'm going to sort of swear of a management clusterfuck. And these are situations where leaders get so excited about something, they have the illusion that it's going to be great. Their impatience and their incompetence turns other people incompetent. And I think it's a pretty good example of that, because when you put people in a position where it's impossible to do the work, but you push them to do it, well, that's a friction problem, but it's also a frustration problem, because and many of us have been on the path to failure and know it and can't stop our boss from pushing us there. So it's a challenge.
That's a great quote. Well, I started applying it to myself, the Sergey Brin story, because I'm very interested in what all these artificial intelligence tools could mean for how Stanford Seed teaches in Africa and South Asia.
Right.
The methodology, could we use digital avatars? So, of course, I got onto one of these websites and I took an old video clip of myself, and now I can speak in Indonesian, in Japanese, and French. And I'm so excited about this. I'm like, guys, why are we producing video in studios? We can create digital avatars of ourselves. And so I got all excited about this. I'm like, this is our number one use case. We should roll this out in December, right? And then I read your book, and I was like, is there anyone in my organization who feels empowered to say, time out? Intellectual property, data security. Do you really want your voice clone out there in the ether in your likeness? Like, maybe it's a great idea, but let's at least, red team this thing.
Well, so in the case of AI, in its early days, but for better or worse, I've been in engineering school for 40 years now, and my perspective is I will write things on AI, but only with one or two co-authors who know much, much more about it. And this is a positive friction story. So right now, we're in a situation where everybody is just rushing ahead really fast. AI's got to be fast mover, first mover advantage, or we're dead and all that. The evidence we have about other kinds of AI, I especially point to a couple of my colleagues, Melissa Valentine, who's a professor in my department, and also there's a woman named Rebecca Hines, they're both discussed in the book, who is head of the Asana Work Innovation Lab. And the evidence that they're seeing is that the people who win in other forms of AI, well, they go slow enough to work with the content experts so that they get the right content in it, because if you don't work with the content experts, it can't just scrape the web and find it. And then the other thing that they do is they get them on board. So it turns out that slowing down to win this is a case where it might be worthwhile.
I want to talk about exactly that. So slowing down to win. You bring the example in the book that sometimes first mover advantage is a trap.
Yep. And
it's a trap because you're Google Glass, you're rushing to market, it's not ready. Give me some other examples.
Well, another, and we have an example of actually a cooking show in the UK, but there's lots of other examples where and the way we put it is the second or third or fourth mouse gets the cheese, not the first mouse gets the cheese. So you watch your competitor.
Because the first three are dead?
Yeah, the first three are dead, the main. You watch, it's exactly right. You watch your competitor and you learn from it, and some of the methodologies is that Airbnb was not the first whatever that business is. There's this thing called couch surfing.
Yep.
And then there was a whole bunch of, if we do Amazon, there are other online bookstores. And some people may remember MySpace before Facebook. And nobody ever talks about the Netscape browser anymore, from what I can tell.
Right.
So anyhow, so this idea that sometimes being fast, all that does is get you killed off more quickly. So sometimes you can slow down and watch.
So another example you talk about, of course, everyone wants to figure out how to make people subscribe to their business, their service, or their product, right? Because it increases your unit economics for every customer, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, people are trying to sell me on the idea that I need to subscribe for a toothbrush or subscribe for a razor, which is like Kara Swisher, the journalist, she calls that business model assisted living for millennials, which I think is so spot on, right?
She's so good.
But one of the issues with this obsession about subscription models is companies start to believe that a good customer friction would be to make it hard to cancel the subscription.
Yeah, they call that, the people who do this research, the Roach Motel problem. It's easy to check in. It's impossible to check out.
I like that.
And there was this incredible irony that the New York Times went after Amazon for how difficult it was to get rid of their subscription, but then it turns out it was even harder to get rid of a New York Times subscription. The counter example, which we use in the book, and I had some involvement with some folks from Netflix. There was a woman named Patty McCord. She was head of HR for some years, and then I had him as an advisee, a guy named Eric Colson who did algorithm stuff. And there was sort of an internal revolt in 2006 or 2007, something like that. Netflix, maybe it was about 2010, where they decided to make it really easy for people to unsubscribe to Netflix. And they had two reasons. One was sort of a moral reason. The other reason is my friend Eric Colson, who's a data guy, said, well, when it's easy to unsubscribe, you get really great data that people are losing interest in your service. So his argument, and Patty McCord's argument too, is one reason that Netflix has done well in the long term is that they get really early good data that people are dropping off instead of, well, it's such a pain to get rid of your subscription that you don't bother and you just pay and you despise whatever service for the rest of your life.
Comcast.
Comcast, yeah, we're all stuck with Comcast.
Yeah.
So, it's monopoly.
I love that. So we have a little game we play on the podcast called Lightning Round, True or False. And okay.
Okay.
So these are meant to piss you off. So
I'm bad at tests, so let's see.
Okay. A zero friction workplace is the ultimate goal for maximum productivity.
False. Oh, why? Well, because some things should be hard. It should be hard to cheat. It should be hard to steal. It should be hard to make stupid decisions fast. And then, as every fraternity, sorority, and military knows, and IKEA, that suffering creates its own sort of commitment to the product or the service or the cause or whatever. So suffering isn't all bad because the labor needs to love effect.
The labor leads to love. Okay, next lightning round, true or false. Most workplace friction comes from out-of-touch executives.
Oh, I'll give them 25% of. So I'll say false, but with a footnote, which is that we all deserve some blame for it. And sometimes it's external forces we have no control over.
Right.
It could be rules. It could be regulations. It could be really you do need 15 accountants to satisfy the terms of the grant because and 3 lawyers.
Especially if it's the European Union.
So I would like to blame executives for everything, and we have a whole chapter about how oblivious leaders can cause problems. But I don't want to give them all the blame or all the credit for fixing it.
Okay, that's fair. And there's a section in your book I want to talk about, which is celebrating friction warriors, and not assuming that everyone who's part of the friction value chain is to blame. Right?
Yes.
Okay, here's another one. The more is better approach usually leads to better outcomes for customers.
The more is better. You mean as in more services?
The customer is always right. They want this extra service.
Well, so I will say false because first of all, there's the old saying that the road to failure is to try to please everyone. So you end up with so many different features,
product bloat,
and so many different, so much complexity. It's ridiculous. In the area that and we've written, and I'm working on this now, even since the book was done. The area I'm really interested in is digital tools. So what happens is that in a lot of organizations, and even some organizations or companies do pricing strategies based on this. They call it the credit card problem. Everybody can buy whatever software they want with the company credit card. So pretty soon, at our employer, Stanford, I was asked by, I won't name the unit, to learn Salesforce and Asana. And I love those companies because they're my clients and I work with them, but I don't know Asana and Salesforce, and nobody else at Stanford requires you to do it. And so it was just somebody had the authority to do it. So to me, that's sort of like everybody's getting what they want, and it's a tragedy of the commons. We have to every day learn a new software platform.
Okay, guilty as charged, Your
Yeah,
Honor.
yeah, me too.
Yeah. Okay, the last true and false. Protocols and routines stifle creativity and adaptability.
Ooh, sometimes. But let's say false, because it's more fun to say false. Because one of the things that they do, and this is every cognitive psychologist can tell you this, that to do the hard things in life, we've talked about some of these, creativity, true love rather than sort of surface commitment. We even talked about the power of emotional bonding. What you've got to do is you've got to kind of clear the way, and having mindless processes that work, that are so good that, and there's one of the most wonderful designers I ever met. This guy's name is Bill Moggridge. He passed away, but he had the patent on the first laptop computer and got royalties for like the clam shape. That was his design. And anyhow, he had this wonderful expression that the best designs are ones that you notice that you don't notice. It's like the difference between, for those who've been airports, going to the Singapore airport and the Heathrow airport.
Oh my God.
Because Singapore, I've been there about 10 times. I just walk through and
somehow you get where you need to be.
Yeah, and then Heathrow, you wait in line for an hour and a half, and then you wait in line for an hour
and a half. Well, then you ride a bus like 20 kilometers in circles underground. I'm like, where are we going? How is this Terminal 5? This must be Terminal 55, you know? But or Frankfurt.
Frankfurt. But the key thing there, and I think this is one reason we're so interested in subtraction and making things mindless and getting rid of friction, it's to clear the way for the things in life that are hard and should be hard. So that's kind of our philosophy.
Such as creative process.
Creative process. I mean, Teresa Mabile, who's Harvard Business School, spent 50 years studying creativity, starting with her PhD thesis at Stanford probably 55 years ago. She will show you that when people rush, they may feel more creative, but usually they do worse.
You have to try 6 bad ideas to find one that's truly new or interesting or different or good. I love that. What that made me think about is how organizations actually need to have multiple personalities.
Yep.
Depending on where you're sitting, right? You don't want your accountants to make 7 mistakes to do the right thing.
Right.
You want them to make 0 mistakes and always do the right thing, right? Although, as you mentioned, they can also introduce bad friction.
So one of my favorite colleagues, his name's Diego Rodriguez. And he's been involved in all sorts of innovative stuff. His last real job was at Intuit. Now he does boards and stuff. But when he was a consultant, a creativity consultant, he used to ask people, his clients, where's your place for failing? And I like that because I don't want the airplane pilot or the doctor to fail while they're serving me because I'll be dead.
Right.
But there's the simulator and there's operations on cadavers and things like that. So there are and now we can simulate those things too.
But I think maybe there's also, as companies get really big and unwieldy, they start to fear that they're losing sight of what's coming and innovation. So the number of Merck Pharmaceuticals, a friend of mine was head of innovation. And I'm like, wait a minute, so you guys have an innovation team? Because that tends to piss off everyone else in the organization. Because they're like, what? I'm not innovative because I'm not in the innovation room? We're innovating all day long over here and whatever it is,
Well, I mean, so I was involved with some of the innovation movement. And I do think you say that they have multiple personalities. But there are certain, and we talk in the book about grease people or gunk people. There are some people who are, let's just say, I don't know what's their upbringing or their training or whatever, or their genetics, but they're the people who are better at enforcing rules and making sure that we all sort of follow process. And you do need some people like that. Like we want a pilot who does that.
Professor Michelle Gelfand. She's
Yeah, yeah.
There's the rule makers and the rule breakers, and they're sitting next to each other.
Yeah, and we talk about how good leaders know how to switch and send signals about it's time to follow the rules, or and then of course we talk about people who workplace vigilantes are sort of nuts and they stifle everybody. That's another problem too.
So let's jump into what you call the 5 prevalent and destructive friction traps in the book, and I love that. We talked briefly about oblivious leaders,
yes,
and you use the phrase power poisoning. What is that? And then you also use the term cookie licking.
Oh,
now, I'm interested in both of those. Like, what's power poisoning and what's cookie licking?
Well, so power poisoning is, and there's really a lot of research. The leader of this is Dr. Keltner at UC Berkeley, and then our own Deborah Grunfeld has done a lot of research on this too. When you put people in a position of power, and this is something that they replicate over and over again.
Starting with Nero and Caesar.
And maybe being a first-time manager too.
Yeah.
Or maybe getting a new $300,000 car in Silicon Valley might be enough to do this to you.
I meet them when I'm biking.
I meet them. Me too. They're just terrifying. Is that in general, when people feel powerful or more powerful, they tend to focus on their own needs. They tend to focus less on the needs of others, and then they tend to act like the rules don't apply to them. Or
is it that they think that their needs must reflect everyone else's needs because they're so successful, so they must have been making good calls all along?
Well, yes, and that's we call that the sort of centrality problem, which is that leaders will tend to believe that they know what's going on in their organization. It's my company, I'm CEO, even though everybody's afraid to tell them the truth, so they don't know what's going on. And then related to that is we call it the absence of inconvenience, that the classic thing that when you're in a position of power, very often, well, you don't have to wait in line.
You get the special car, you get the chopper. So I remember that. Tell me, you had some great examples of where, I think it was in, why is buying a car such a miserable experience in the United States? And when the people and of course there's a whole dealer network, but the executives in these car companies, they get a new car like every 6 months, and they get it serviced and gassed up at the office for free.
And so this was, we were doing some research at General Motors right before they went bankrupt. And we would fly to Michigan. This was right before the meltdown. We'd fly to Michigan, and they would just always have, like, in those days, a new Hummer or the latest Cadillac or SUV, whatever, and they'd gas it. They'd get it gassed. They'd get it serviced. And they also had this thing that the more senior the executive you were, the fancier car that you got. And I actually got in trouble for complaining. I said, this is protecting you from the experience.
From the friction that your customers are facing in trying to buy your car.
Yeah, that's the other thing. That's the other thing. You wouldn't trade it in; they just would take it away and they'd bring you a new car. And I believe that still exists in some form. At least when I was fact checking the book in about 2022, it was still existing. But I actually don't think it's a good thing. And one company, by the way, and there's some things I don't like about them either, but Tesla is one of the companies that does not protect its employees from that. They don't have a dealer network. You buy it online, but there's no special protections or pricing for executives. At least in the past there weren't. Maybe they've changed it now.
So that's another symptom of. I mean, that's a way to generate this centrality and what is the absence of
inconvenience.
Absence of inconvenience. I love that. Every airline executive should have to be in boarding group 6.
Yeah,
at least once. So I don't want to lose what is cookie licking.
So cookie licking. So there are various effects of being in power.
I think my older brother was a cookie licker, but I just want to double check.
Well, the cookie, it comes from the notion that what little kids will do is they'll lick all the cookies, so they're all there is, and
no one wants to touch them.
No one wants to touch them. Calling dibs so other people can't get it. But where this happens in organization is that people, especially in power, will become bottlenecks and not even realize that they will insist on reviewing things. Yeah. They will insist on interviewing people, or they will insist, and this is where it comes from Microsoft in particular, they'll call dibs on a product feature. And even though they're not the right group to do it, and they keep putting it off, it never gets done.
They want to make sure no one else gets credit.
No, right.
So they grab it and then it dies. I want to get to friction fixing, obviously, before we run out of time. But we talked about the 5 prevalent friction traps. We've talked about oblivious leaders. The one that really captured my mind was what you call addition sickness.
Yes.
Hit me. What is addition sickness?
There's a whole bunch of forces in our brains and in our social systems that make our default problem-solving style is addition, not subtraction. There's a bunch of experiments done by a group at University of Virginia, everything from how to fix a university, how to fix a Lego model, a soup recipe. They had all these different things that the default problem-solving style is addition. So that's the first problem that our brains go there.
And is that like part inertia, part I don't want to rock the boat? Somebody put a lot of time into this previous process, so it's easier to add than to challenge?
Well, that might be some of it. There's also the argument that Lottie Klotz, who's one of the co-authors, author of Subtract, also makes, is if you think about which one of us got to survive, it was the people who hoarded all the food and everything, right?
Right.
So there's probably some
scarcity.
The scarcity model. So those forces are there. That's the bad news. But I think we should talk about the good news, because there's lots of organizations that do overcome this and do subtraction, and we have lots of examples of how it actually works.
Yeah. So I want to dig right in there. You have some subtraction tools, and I want to go through some of them. You mentioned subtraction rituals.
Yes.
And a colleague of mine, she described in a previous employer, they have something called Halloween end of life party, where they celebrate things they're not going to do anymore.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And they'll even read a eulogy to the dead project or whatever the initiative is that is now being stopped. And I thought, well, that's a great example of a subtraction ritual. Beautiful. You also mentioned subtraction games, subtraction specialists, meeting repair and removal purges. Love that one. That was a great story. Give me some examples of your favorite examples of some of these subtractions.
Well, to me, it starts with the mindset that yes, and there's a venture capitalist I know, Michael Deering. He describes good leaders see themselves as, and you're going to do that with this film. Thank goodness you'll make us look smarter than we actually are. The folks, the crew here will make us look smarter than we are. Is that they see themselves as editors in chief. And so it starts with that mindset. We've done this with 125 groups by now.
Wow.
We call it the subtraction game. And what we do is we get them in a room and we have them first make a list of stuff that's getting them in the way and driving them crazy. And then we say, and I just did this with a bunch of vice presidents who were complaining about stuff in their large software companies. And then we say, okay, so now what are you going to do to get rid of it? And sometimes they just bullshit and say they're going to get rid of it. But sometimes on the spot, they do make changes. So there was another large software company I was working with. And on the spot, vice president had 800 people reporting to him. He changed his weekly meeting to every 2 weeks. I was like, yeah, that's actually, and you start doing the math with all the numbers.
Thousands of hours.
Thousands of hours.
What we did at Oxfam is we had offices in my Oxfam America, it's a confederation, had offices in 8 or 9 countries. I had 250 people reporting to me and getting emails day and night. And in all these standing meetings. And I realized there was a couple of things going on here. One is that people didn't know who could give them the answer because they didn't know who was accountable for which kinds of decisions. So then you CC everyone and hope one of those fish will bite the hook and bring it in, right? The other thing I noticed was that if you require people to tell you what is the purpose of the meeting and what we should do beforehand to prepare for the meeting, so sort of an objective, and a process, and an outcome. If you could not provide that in the meeting invite, nobody had to come.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
So if you get an invite that's like, I need you for an hour, and there's no other information, you can just say no.
So I especially like the first one about it's unclear who's the owner, because one of the things for us, one of the root causes, and Huggy's really obsessed with this, my co-author, is the notion that friction is often an orphan problem, that we point at other people and we tell them it's their job to fix it. And that's why sometimes having specialists in the Apple culture, they have the DRI, directly responsible individual. And when you have a system
and
where
that's not about where they sit in the org chart. It's about a task that they own.
Yes.
Okay.
And Apple, so if you read everything about what management gurus say a great company should be, it should be decentralized. It should be open. transparent. There should not be a severe hierarchy. And then there should not be specialization. Apple is the exact opposite and makes me sometimes worry. And speaking of friction, I've got a friend, Kim Scott. This isn't in the book. I just heard this at a party 2 weeks ago. So Kim Scott worked at Apple and worked at Google. Google, she said, I'd get 500 or 600 emails a day, and everybody would be asking my opinion, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd go to Apple, where it's really secretive and you're not even allowed to ask other people what they're working on. She said, I would get 5 emails a day if I was lucky.
Wow. That's incredible.
And so I guess the right thing is in between.
Somewhere, yeah.
But that just absolutely amazed me, and that's a situation where you cure addition sickness by making it impossible for people to add.
Right. Sorry, not going to happen. There's a whole section in your book about who are your allies. Like, what's the pyramid of people that can support you in fighting friction as a leader?
Yeah, that's important. And one thing, and I don't know where we put this, but especially in the world that you live in, the most impressive case to me in the book is an effort led by Michael Brennan to fix it's a benefits form that was filled out by 2.5 million Michiganders a year, and 1,000 questions, 42 pages long.
For some social welfare benefit?
Well, it was for almost anyone, whether it be for food, financial assistance, everything. You had to complete medical care. You had to complete this form. And my favorite question in it was, when was your child conceived? So they think about how hard it is, but
that is so funny.
And to the credit of the group that oversaw it in Michigan, they got the head of it into a room, and he couldn't even get to page 8. So he realized there was a problem, and they all worked together. But the part about high friction was, so the new form was 80% shorter, which is a huge cut.
Right.
And had all these positive effects. But there were 1,700 pages of rules that they had to satisfy before the form could be legal and could actually be used. So they had to pull over for 6 months and
to deal with this other friction process.
Yes, yeah. To work with the lawyers, work with the people who understood all the forms in both federal and state rules. But without those 6 months, they would not have gotten rid of friction for 2.5 million Michiganders a year who complete the form. So
friction to fight friction.
That's
interesting.
It's not easy business always.
One of the companies that went through the SEED program is called Haktarshak in India, which means a guide to your rights, is the translation from Urdu. And the genesis of this company was that they realized there's more than 20,000 social benefit welfare programs across India.
20,000.
Yeah, some are federal, some are state, some are local, some are for farmers, some are for women, some are for indigent people, some are for people who've been in an accident. And most people don't know about them, or they don't know if they qualify, or they don't know how to apply. So Haktarshak set aside basically 2 years and created the ultimate database of all these programs, and then created a simple survey form, which I forget what they call them. The village agents could just go to your household and interview you, and figure out, okay, these are the 7 programs you don't even know about that you qualify for. And I'm going to help you apply.
So that's great, and that's got one-stop shopping, which is hard to do in decentralized systems.
Well, and the heavy investment there was actually understanding and making their whole algorithm accurate.
Right.
So you had to understand exactly who qualifies, exactly what paperwork is needed. I think there's a stage 2 where Haktarshak sits down with policymakers and says, this is what it takes to actually get your benefits out the door. Maybe we could simplify some of this, right? And the interesting thing is the incentives are aligned. Politicians want those programs to be accessed, right? They don't want them to be sticky like that. So I want to quickly, just because this one really touched me, another one of your friction problems is jargon monoxide.
Oh, jargon monoxide.
Right?
Well, that's, we're having fun with that.
And you have convoluted crap, meaningless bullshit, in-group lingo, and jargon mishmash syndrome.
Yes.
My favorite is meaningless bullshit, because the way you describe it is empty and misleading communication that is meaningless both to the bullshitter and the bullshit, which is so true, right? And the classic one, I worked at Asian Development Bank, doing big loan projects in Southeast Asia, and every loan document had to have the section on gender mainstreaming. right, that you had addressed women's issues in the program. And they all had the same sentence, which is the project has fully incorporated gender, has fully mainstreamed gender issues in its design. And that was what was in that section. It was just, and it was meaningless.
Which
right?
meant not, and was a kind of like a necessary, maybe even legalistic ritual sometimes.
It had to be there.
It had to be there.
It had to be there, whether you actually did something meaningful or not. You also talk about much abused and overused words that no longer mean anything.
Yes.
What's your favorite?
Well, our favorite, and people think I'm celibate, it's agile. And I could, by the way, to pick my own world, design thinking, but let's go after agile. There wasn't, in the example we use, there was an Australian consultant who gives this talk, and apparently he's still giving this talk, that he defines 40 different kinds of agile in 40 minutes, which sounds really pretty fun. And I've got like this.
And was he thought he was doing something informative and interesting?
Well, it is an amazing talk.
He wasn't making fun of himself.
No. He wasn't. It was meant seriously. It's kind of a beautiful talk. But there's a book called Noise by Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winners, and others. And so Danny Kahneman defines noise as a random scatter of ideas. And to me, agile and holacracy, by the way, is one of the things on the list of agile techniques. And there was a whole bunch of things I don't even know what they are. A lean startup was one of them too. I don't know how lean startup and holacracy are the same thing, but to us, that's what happens when an idea gets overly adopted in too many different ways. And then, bless her heart, one of my friends has written a book about emotional agility. And it's really a cool book, but it's like another use of the word agile. Yeah. So that's another kind of the jargon mishmash syndrome, is when something devolves that it means nothing. So many things to different people, it means no one. And the Agile Software Manifesto, which was the start of that actually meant something. It just got diluted and distorted over the years.
People take artistic license with the term. So I want to talk a little bit about fixing friction in organizations. And one of the things that you said that there are 3 convictions required of fiction fixers. And I think the one that I thought might actually make a cool core value is we are trustees of other people's time.
Yes, that's the main idea of the book, I think.
Right. Say a bit more about.
Well, to us, the trustees of other people's time, it doesn't just mean that you make things easy, but it's always being aware of how you're imposing on other people's time and doing it more mindfully, because almost everything starts with that, and that includes when to go slow, when to go fast, is really a big part of that. So to us, that's being a trustees. And the example that we start out with is Winston Churchill, a month before the Blitzkrieg started in 1940, writing a note to bureaucrats saying, please make things shorter. And at one point he said something like, the length and complexity of a memo is not an indicator of a diplomat's excellence. And
it was the first Paperwork Reduction Act.
In like the other ones, it didn't work either, by the way.
Is that right?
So I bet you things are not more simple. And even when he became prime minister again in the 50s, he complained that things were even worse despite his efforts.
Interesting.
But to us, the trustee's mindset is really important. And some of those things, as I say, are not just saving people's time, but being aware that when you're imposing on people or not, and that's why we also have a chapter in the book about what to make hard and what to make easy. But
I don't know if this is urban legend, but I remember hearing about some college student getting a paper back, an essay, and the grade was an F. And the professor wrote, "You've written 10 pages of bullshit. If you'd given me only 3, I would have given you a C." I hope it's true.
I hope it's true, too.
So what are, some of the other things you can do to be a respectful trustee of people's time? One is, of course, what you just said, being aware of how your decisions impact everyone else. There's the whole meeting cleanup and remediation piece. There's one other here that you talked about, which is I will make it safe for myself and others to be absent, focused, and in the flow. And I think it's not in this book, but it's in something else you wrote. That one really touched me because, I've got Slack, I've got text messages, I've got my email. Like I'm just being bombarded, right? And so is everyone else.
Well, and organizations have done some things like that. One of the things that I like and the famous Adam Grant has written about this, is to try to create organizational norms where when somebody doesn't answer your email within an hour and a half, that you're not allowed to write them 4 more emails, because the more you send, the more you receive, and the faster you respond, and you end up with a whole system that ends up being clogged up. I think that's part of it. So there's speed of response. There's also, and we write about this in various ways. There's this notion of being really aware when you're changing stuff about what's reversible and what isn't. And Jeff Bezos talks about this as one-way versus two-way doors. And when you make decisions that are irreversible, selling your company, buying a big company, maybe you should slow down and be careful. But there's lots of decisions that are reversible and easy. And in that situation, sweating over them and analyzing them maybe isn't a great idea if they're reversible. And the example that we use in the book, and I was at the meeting, was long ago in the 90s. I spent a year and a half hanging out with one of my PhD students, Andy Hargadon, at IDEO, the famous design firm, which at that point was just a little firm which mostly did product design. And it grew from 60 to 150 people in Palo Alto, and it was just unwieldy. It was just too much of a mess to run as one organization. And so they broke it into 3 studios, and it was this beautiful reorganization. 3 people stood up and gave pitches about why you should join my studio, and everybody got their first choice. This was not the least oppressive reorganization I've ever seen. People still freaked out because it was the first reorganization. And the famous David Kelly, he still has a Groucho Marx type mustache. He shaved it off, and we were freaked out. We could hardly recognize him because we'd never seen him. And he said, this changes like my mustache. I can always grow it back. And he did grow back his mustache, and they did change the structure over the years.
Interesting.
But to me, that idea of treating changes as what's reversible and what isn't is not going to waste as much people's time. And then the other part about friction fixing and being a trustee, which I think is really important, especially in this world of impatience and lack of discipline, which many of us have, is to treat it as it's like mowing the lawn. You've got to, if you do this stuff, you've got to do it regularly. It's like
going to grow back.
Yeah, like I only wash my car about once a year. I don't think it's enough, actually. But.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the third owner of my car. I don't really care what it looks like. I just care that it keeps driving.
So this time use thing. There's bazillion books and stuff written about time use, but some of the most productive people in the world I know, their ability to ignore stuff is just astounding. And
that is interesting.
There is this famous.
Is that the same as their ability to focus and concentrate?
Yeah. And I'm not very good at it, honestly. But one of the famous stories, there's this guy Herb Simon, who won the Nobel Prize. I think he was the first non-economist to win it, and so he won the Nobel Prize. And one of the things that Herb did, and this was in the days pre-internet, so all the information about the news would come in a newspaper, is he didn't read newspapers. And in fact, he gave a talk at the National Press Club proudly announcing this, and they were kind of amazed. And his theory was that if something really important would happen, somebody would tell him about it.
Interesting. That's interesting. I've been slowly shutting off all social media just because I find it both simultaneously depressing and noisy.
Yeah, it's very noisy.
Just trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to cover. You mentioned some other. You said it's like mowing the lawn. That was one of your principles. But you had another principle here, which is that, and I think this comes to your IDEO story. Organizations are malleable prototypes.
Malleable prototypes, yes. And this is the notion that you can. This is the best we can do right now, and instead of making it more and more frictionful, there are, in terms of bad friction. There are things we can do to make them better. So don't just get discouraged and think there's nothing we can do. And I do think that philosophy does run through the book, because we do talk about subtraction where it happens. We do talk about executives who become more aware of their cone of friction, and they impose less friction on people. And one thing that we haven't talked about is coordination, problems which are a huge cause of friction, and sort of the star of the book in terms of coordination problems would probably be Satya Nadella at Microsoft. In that case, a lot of the dysfunctional friction was caused by just a refusal to cooperate in the organization.
Was that what you called broken connections?
Yes. Well, so there's two levels of broken connections. There's ones where I don't give you the information just because I'm too busy or I'm too focused. And then there's the one where I don't give you the information or I even lie to you because I hate you. and the second one was sort of the Microsoft culture.
And this is where people were doing the cookie licking. They would bid on a project or grab ownership of a project that they may not ever touch.
Yes, and I mean, so in 2014, to tell you a brief story, I gave a talk there right after, it was on scaling, right after Satya took over, and they were really talking openly about their dysfunctional internal competition. And it was to the operating systems group, and I got this little tour, and they showed me this Microsoft phone, and I said, "Oh, what happened to that?" And they said it was a complete flop. And I said, "So what happened?" And he said, and I said, "You work with Apple and stuff." And he said, "Well," my host said, "We don't hate Apple, but we hate the people in the phone group. So we'll cooperate with Apple grudgingly, but we'll actively undermine the phone group." And he said that's the culture that Satya is trying to fix. And Satya's made huge progress.
Focus on fixing things, not who to blame.
Well, we all know we can always blame people, but this is, we're just talking about the psychological safety literature here in some ways too.
We did our previous episode of this podcast was on psychological safety, how you create it as a leader to get your team to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
It ain't easy, man, especially when there's power.
Sounds simple. It sounds so simple. Of course I gave everyone a chance to speak up. Bastards.
And they were silent because they knew if they said something, I'd slap them down.
Yeah.
So anyway, from our perspective, and it is easy to blame people, but from our perspective, it's trying to help one another fix things rather than blame things. Is when things end up being useful. Now that doesn't mean that there's some people who, like, go back to sort of like the chicken effers and the hollow Easter benders. There's some people who are not so useful that you might not want to waste your time with.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to be cruel to them and blame them.
Well, in the example you gave of this Michigan social services, whatever the form was, 80-page form, presumably most of the people who were working in that agency knew that form sucked.
Yeah, and in fact,
no one was running around defending page 47.
No, but nobody was, and they'd say it was because of the rules, which were true, and how difficult it was to change and everything. But the interesting thing about that was Adam Selzer, who's one of the co-founders with Michael Brennan of Sevilla. It's the nonprofit in Michigan that led this effort. He said when he first started working with the civil servants and the government leaders, he just viewed them as these sort of hapless bureaucrats. But once he started working with them, he said they knew it sucked too. They wanted to help. They were absolutely wonderful. So to me, that's a message that it's easy to blame bureaucracy and civil servants, but those people, they want to make things better for citizens too.
I love that example. Is there a question you wish I'd asked you? And you can chew on that.
Yeah, well, So the one thing that is my favorite point in the book, which I almost think,
I missed your favorite point in the book.
No, it's late in the book. It comes up late, and I almost think is worth writing another book about. Is the power of love and caring, and I really got this. This guy named Todd Park. Todd Park's most famous for leading the effort to fix the Obamacare site, which would take 8 seconds when you clicked on it when it first, and he led this movement internally. He also did things like he and his brother started something called Athena Health and sold it. And now he's got a new company called Devoted Health to provide health care to people 65 and older like me. It's in 17 states. And his perspective, and he's very good logistically, he's very good with software and leadership, is where we start with is when each one of our agents or representatives talks to a client, we treat them just like they're your mother or your father, somebody you love. And his argument is that if you just started with love, and work backwards, the logistics get easier to fix. And so there's something about it, and it's really mushy. Like, I'm not that mushy or emotional a person, but I do think that as a design principle, love and caring is something that, and this just appears at the end of the book because we interviewed Todd Park really late. One of the most charismatic people I've ever met, and somebody who can get things done and is good technically. So the people I know who work for him in the Obama administration just love him.
That's actually probably the best closing quote we could ever have for this podcast. So, Bob, thank you so much for sharing all of your incredible insights. The book is The Friction Project: How Smart Leaders Make the Right Things Easier and the Wrong Things Harder. I've already read it. It's a fabulous book, and I'm really excited for it. And you said you can order it now.
Sure. Go for it. Thank you. It was lovely to talk.
I can't recommend it enough. This was one of my favorites.
Thank you.